Hi everybody, I am Ken Good from Solibri UK Ltd, and today we're going to take a look at an overview of Solibri Office. We will start by creating a federated model which we will visualise with classifications and standard component handling tools before moving on to checking the model with our parametric rule sets. From there we will use the results to create a presentation to communicate issues with consultants before finishing with a model update which resolves some of the issues we'll no doubt find along the way. Solibri will run on macOS or Windows. Today I happen to be running on Windows. What I'll do now is switch across to the product and we'll start to run through things. So what we're looking at here is Solibri Office version 9.10. It's pretty much as it comes out the box. I've slightly changed the user interface to give it a white background and reduce some of the gaps between some of the views to give us a bit more space to work with, but other than that, what you see is what comes out of the box. First thing I'm going to do is set the role that we will use to work. Roles allow us to assign default rule sets, classifications and information takeoffs, and essentially these provide the tools that we can use to analyse the model in various different ways. The next thing we'll do is go and select the models we wish to federate. So I'm using some sample models here, and what I'll do is I'll select the architectural model, the structural model and the ventilation model, and I'll just open these. As they load, we get presented with a dialog that allows us to set a short name to make it easier to recognise which file is which, and we also get the option to check the discipline we're using. So I'm going to keep this simple. We'll have structural, we'll have architectural, and we'll have ventilation. Now because the ventilation model came from an old system, it's actually defaulted to architectural, so we do a quick check and we change that to ventilation. The reason we do that is the discipline is used by many different classifications and rules and other areas as a quick way of filtering out data within the model. So effectively I've created this federated model made up of 3 separate IFC files, and what we can start to do is spin around, have a look at it and see what's going on. Now because of the different colours from these models, it may not be clear what belongs where, so what we can do is actually switch to this information takeoff view. We'll close that for now, and what we can then do is open an additional classification called federated model alignment. And this allows me to pick and visualise the model where each discipline is set for its own particular colour. So we can go in here, we can see here is the architectural model, here's the structural model, and here's the ventilation model. And what we don't particularly want to see is if we select all 3, the blue and the red overlapping, architectural, structural, that's fairly okay. What we don't want to see is big bits of ventilation models sticking out the roof of the building. So what I have is not too bad. If we want to check it a little bit further, we have tools we can use, such as if we go in here we can hide the 2 different roofs, the structural, the architectural one. We can look down inside. We expect to see vents and ducts in the corridors and going into the rooms, but we don't want to see them sticking out back walls or clashing through walls or any of these bits and pieces. We've got some other tools. We can go to sectioning, and what I can do is stick a section up here and then just push and pull down through the building to have a quick check and make sure that these are coordinated and aligned roughly where we'd expect them to be. So that doesn't look too bad so far. So one of the main areas to take a look at is this duct over here, and we can see that these 2 duct elements sit quite nicely within that pipe shaft as we'd expect them to be. So we're pretty sure that that's okay. I'll return the view back to normal and I'll reset to default view so we're looking at something that resembles a building. What I'll also do is I'll switch back to the model layout. I'm going to use another one of our tools here called Info to just check that we have data attached to the model itself. So if I grab one of these walls, we can see we have various different tabs of information. So we've got lots of identification information, location, quantities, materials. We can even see relationships, so we can see nearest spaces, federated floors, lots of different information that enables us to interrogate the model in more detail. We're not just looking at the geometry here. We can even go into some of the property sets that have been exported from the authoring tool as well. This information will vary from component to component, so a window will have additional panels of information, a door will be slightly different again, and a wall with openings will behave differently to a wall that has no openings. So there's lots of rich information available in here that we can work with. So once we've confirmed the model is as we expect it to be, there's data attached to it, and it's all in the right place, what we'll then do is move on to checking, which is the main part of what we're looking at. We do get some tasks appear, and we can actually go through them. So this is asking me to verify this particular classification. So what that's looking for is that there's nothing in this unclassified. So some of the rules obviously have a tie-in where they look for components within this list, and if they're unclassified, it means they're not in this list, so they're not going to be checked in the various different rules or tasks that are associated. So I'll close that, and the main thing to do here is, we'll just do a quick reset because of the classification. The main thing to do here is just go and check the model. You'll see this starts to process, you'll see the progress bar. As it goes through and processes, then you start to see some of the results flagging up. We have 3 different levels of severity. We have the red column, which is our high severity issues. We've got moderate severity issues, and we've got low severity issues. These can be programmed into the rules, and you can set them depending on what your requirements happen to be. Once we've done that, it's then a case of this is finished processing. We can switch off some of these ones here if we want to start with the high severity ones. I need to drill down the list for more of them to disappear. But actually right now what I'm going to do is start at the top and just work my way down. So at the very top level we have this rule set called bin validation architectural. Underneath that we then have the various different subsets of the rules. So in here we have model structure check, we can go into this. Lots of these are okay. And if we click on them, we can have a look at the description down in the info here to see what this check is actually doing. But let's come back out of there, and what we'll do is we'll select the component check. Now further down we have this result summary, and actually if I go back to the very top and just select all the results, what we can see is that we've got 52 high severity issues throughout the model. So that's fair enough, but if I actually click on that field, then I can visualise where they happen to be in the 3D space. Likewise with the moderate, and likewise with the low. And if I select them all, then we can see them all. The number below this relates to the number of issues per 1,000 cubic metres. The unit itself is not important, but over time, as we track through various different changes and updates, that number should be on a general downwards pattern. So for now, let's just go back up here and we'll start to work our way through. We'll come down to the very first issue that we can find, and the first one happens to be a wall height issue. So once we've got to this, we can see the result. When we drill down, we'll get to the issue itself, which is this warning triangle, and it tells me that we've got wall components with the wrong value. The actual value is 310, and this rule is focusing on any walls that are less than or equal to 500. So we can see here, we have a little wall. We don't really get much more information at this stage, so we need to dig a little bit deeper. So what I'll actually do is reset the view to the default visualization stage, and what we'll then do is create a section box around this particular issue. So the wall there is the one that we're actually talking about. If we use our different tools, so let's take our section and extend it down a little bit, and maybe if we come across here and pull this section back through the wall behind it, try not to move out too much. What we can actually see is what we're looking at, and if we take this section plane in here, it's a little bit clearer, but what we've actually got is not a wall that's a major problem, but what it actually is a little bit of plasterboard downstand, a bulkhead between 2 different levels of ceiling. So what I can do is if I grab the info tool, I can highlight it in bright green, and what I can then do is come across here, right click, and I'm going to add a slide. So by adding a slide and putting in an automatic description, what I can start to do is populate an issue which can then be communicated later to whatever consultant is appropriate to deal with this issue, whether it's just a discussion point, whether it's something that needs to be resolved, or whether we have to take other action. So right now the status is rejected. We can't accept it because it might have to be altered in some way. The status is open because we haven't done anything with it. The BCF status, depending on what we want to use here, this is probably just for information at this stage, or possibly a warning. Pick whatever's appropriate. Stage is up to us to enter, so I'm just going to call this one Stage X. And we'll set a due date of next Friday, wherever that happens to be. Responsibility wise, these are tags that we can use to organise these things. So we'll say, well, this is an architectural thing, we don't need to involve anybody else. We've got a little preview of what this looks like. If we want it from a different angle, we can actually add a second view. So in the background here, you'll see the 3D rotates and updates. And behind this, we've actually got a direct link to the component itself, so that if it needs to be modified in the authoring tool, we can go back there and fix things. To cut a long story short, that is one issue that's been created. What we then need to do is go through the rest of the issues in this list and make some sort of decision with them. Now, some are a little bit easier than others, so let me find some other examples here. So if we come into the clearance checks, we have a whole pile of clearance in front of Windows issues. And the first one, when we go to it and double click, it goes and it builds everything and it actually shows what the issue is if we look at them individually. What we can see is that we have a rule that picks a window, it gives us a box of a meter in front and behind, and if anything lands inside that box, it flags it as some sort of issue because there's no clearance in front of the windows. In actual fact, these are fixed windows. The model's fairly old, so it's not a curtain wall system. But what it's actually highlighting is the columns that make up the structure of the building. Now, unfortunately, because of the type of building, or fortunately because of the architecture and the exposed columns, there is nothing we can do about this. So as an issue, what I might want to do at this stage is just blanket right click on the very top level here and just mark that off as accepted. That means the tick will remain there as we process further updates and things, unless something changes and new columns are added or whatever else. That will just be remembered and that will carry on from there. We have a similar situation in the next one here where the windows actually join together. It's a case of going through each one and looking at each example to see what's what. So we don't have time to go through. I've got a pre-prepared model that I've got more of these processed, so I'm just going to pick out another couple of ones because you'll see why shortly. But if we go in here to deficiency detection, components are below and above. We have an absolute classic where if we go here to here to here, what we have is a whole bunch of columns, and we have a roof that they're holding up, and we have a little bit of ventilation space between the two. So that's not really the traditional building method, and that really should be addressed. So certainly here, I want to capture this, capture the description. It's certainly rejected, it is open, we'll make it stage X again, we'll make this, we'll bring it forward to Wednesday next week because it really is an urgent issue. It's architectural, it may also involve structures, so we'll include those. If there's individuals, then what we can do is go and type in email addresses. That will crop it down to just initials. We can see the preview. I think everything with that is as clear as it needs to be. Again, the components are tagged, so they are clearly identifiable, easily identifiable in the authoring tool to fix them. So we can close that one and move on to the next case. There's another couple that I'll just pick out. So we have here under space location, space validation, we have a classic example of a space boundary which doesn't tie in to the boundaries of the room that it's actually in itself. So in ArchiCAD terms, the zone may not fit to the walls. In Revit terms, that would be the room. But one way or another, we need to fix things. The nice thing here is we actually get a description that even lists how big an error we're actually looking at here, so we can determine, is this a big problem or is it a small problem? So this certainly is one that we want to add a slide. Again, we'll give this a stage, we'll give it a date, next Friday. It's architectural, I might be involved, someone else, whatever, but we'll put the description in, close it down, and we'll move on to the next one. I'll do just one more here before I move to the pre-prepared one. So Here we have a classic example that is something that's really difficult to visualise in the authoring tool. What we have is a duplicate section of wall inside itself effectively. So if I grab our select tool and do just a window selection around the left hand side, that picks up and highlights the fact that we have a wall within a wall. And what I'm trying to do before I capture this as an image, I want to get it looking as bad as possible so that it clearly describes what the problem is. If we're not too sure or we can't really visualise it properly here, we have some other tools like the markup tool, so we could go and actually draw a flower on the wall to highlight it. We could draw an arrow across it if we want to do something like that. One way or another, we want to just describe that we have an issue here. So we'll stop that for now, and what we'll do is just go back and add another slide. Give it the description. It's architectural. If there is someone else involved, we give them their email address. We do the usual bits and pieces. Stage, let's make this Y this time, and we'll make this wherever it is, further down the line, 4th of October, there we go. Again, we've got the image. If we need more to describe it, we can add further images. If we find that we do all this sort of stuff and we don't like them, we can go back, we can delete them, and we can even go and zoom in a bit closer, refresh them. So we get tons of control over the appearance of these issues. Ultimately, this is what will go through BCF or through the online issue management systems to tag with the problem to describe exactly what's going on. So that's a couple of quick examples. We don't have time to go through all of them, so I'm going to do a bit of a switch over to one that I made earlier. And here we have exactly the same model, but what you'll see is rather than lots of different coloured warning triangles here, because I've processed them, they've gone grey. So if we actually go into them, clearance in front of windows, you'll see here that I've already accepted this one. This one I've rejected, but I've also added a slide, and I can go back in and open it and further read the description. You'll see I've actually created lots of different views of the same thing to try and just describe this as accurately as possible. So there's a number of different views there. But the aim of the game is, once we've done that, is we need to go through the process of creating a presentation so we can communicate this to other people. So for that, we use the layout, funnily enough, called communication. And because this started as a new file, there's nothing here yet, so I'm going to create a new presentation. And we have various different options. The first one would just be a blank presentation, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm not using any of these BCFs or XLs. I'm going to go straight to the checking results. We can give this a title, so we'll just call this Thin Validation, preferably without a spelling mistake, and we'll give it a prefix of BV. What that'll do then is pick up the results, the 15, the 8 and the 1 that I've processed, click OK and let it do the work. So there's a slight tweak to the interface here. I'm going to pull that across and pull that up to there. So what we get is two different ways to look at these issues. We can either go through and pick them individually here, and we can use the graphic to recognise them, or we can use this list and we can actually organise. If I change that the opposite way, we can see these are all the ones that are tagged for the structural engineer. We can actually put a flag onto those, and we can actually filter the whole view. So if you've got, as I said, pick 100 at random. If you've got 100 issues but there's only 25 you're working on, you can actually filter that off completely so that you only send to the 25. You only visualise the 25 that you want to work on. The send bit is because this also acts as a filter when it comes to reporting, because when we report this, we can go out to various different formats, but we can send only the marked items. So it's another way of filtering and say this is a report for the structural engineer, and then only these issues go and not everything else. In terms of reporting, once we've been through here and we've just done a check to make sure that everything is up to date, we can report out to 3 different BCF formats. So version 1 and version 2, and the most recent one is 2.1. Format wise, they do slightly different things in terms of the number of images that are attached and in terms of the number of fields that actually go with it in 2.1. So if you're communicating with anybody, it's a good idea to have a word beforehand to just check which version of BCF they can read and accept. This method will create a physical BCF file. BCF zip is actually version 1 and 2, BCF is 2.1, but it's a physical file that you would then transmit by email or upload or Dropbox or whatever method it happens to be. We also have the option that we can send general reports as PDFs or rich text. So these are more traditional paper type reports. And probably the favourite method of doing any traditional paper type reports is to use Excel, and we would create a template file which gives us the option to output with custom headers, logos, fonts, colours, corporate branding, whatever you want to call it. But basically we choose what one we want and then we just hit the old save button. If I go through the option, I'll send out a BCF version 2, we'll just create this, we choose where it goes, we hit the save button and it creates the zip file. What happens next, typically, is that BCF zip or BCF file goes off to the consultant at the other end. Another way to do it is to send it directly through our BCF connector to an issue management system. You'll see here we can synchronise presentation, but we will do a follow-up session to go into that in a little bit more detail. So what we need to do now is another little pretend cut and go back to something that I kind of prepared earlier. So the idea now is that we've gone through a bit of a workflow process where we have created a bunch of issues, they have been reported to the various different parties to go and fix whatever issues happen to be involved there, and then what we get in return is a new IFC file that we need to use to update this model so that we have revision B of the architectural model. That should fix a number of issues, and we'll come back to this area here in particular a couple of slides so we can show how those get resolved and how we can then process them. So what I need to do is go back to the file menu and I'm going to choose update model, and what I'll do is choose to update this version of the file and I'm going to swap it out to this one here. So effectively I'm going from revision A to revision B. So we just OK that one. That does a little bit of processing. And when it's finished, if we have a quick look, we can see one obvious change up here where this area on top of the building has become a bit larger, but other than that it's quite difficult to see. In the interim period, we don't have time to get into it in this session, but in the interim period what we can actually do is run what's called a model comparison rule set, and we can compare revision A to revision B, and that predominantly checks the geometry and the data between the two files and looks for anything that's new, anything that's been removed, and anything that's been modified. And it can report in exactly the same way that we see if I go to checking. It reports in the same way on those rule sets in here. So you get a real good indication of just how much work has actually been done from version to version, because it's quite easy for people to say that there's loads and loads of things done, but now you can actually see and quantify how many things have actually been done. But when we return and look at this checking area, what you'll notice is that everything's greyed out. There are no results to see, there's nothing to do. This happens every time there's an update to, if we go back to model, to this model tree structure. So this shows what models are actually in the SMC file itself, which is the file we're working on. So anytime there's anything added, removed or updated, the rule sets stop and hold until we check again, because the content's changed, it has to rerun the rules to see what it finds. So when we get through that, hopefully some of these will disappear. There might be some new ones appear, so there's still some outstanding issues here, so there's something we need to look at there. There's another one in here. We need to go through and process those again, but if we assume that's been done, what we can do is go back to this communication area, and the nice visual clue we get here is when we look at this issue sorter, there's a little warning triangle appears if this issue is related to a physical result. So if I right click here and say show in results, when I drop back, it takes me back into the checking area and I can see the result, and it gives me access to the rule sets, everything to actually understand what's going on here. So I can see that that issue is not resolved, it's not changed in any way. So The triangle ones, basically nothing's changed. If I scroll down to number 9 here and select it, what we can see is we've got a preview, because that's just a static image that we created 10 minutes ago. But the 3D view is always live. And what we can see now is that these columns actually reach up and touch the roof, which is probably a good thing. So what we can do then is review what's going on here. Now we can add comments. Probably better if they're in some sort of sensible format, but you get the idea. But up here, what we can then do is in the issue details is look at the coordination information. So this issue has actually been resolved. So we can set it for resolved. The status is still going to be an error. The rest of the options in here, that's what it was remembered as. The stage and the due date, we can leave them as they are, but the fact is we have resolved this issue, so we can mark that one off. Similarly, if we go down the list, there will be another one at the bottom here where we can grab, and this is the one where we have the duplicate wall. Now, I did the screenshot slightly differently, but you can see the blue wall inside the other wall, whereas the 3D view, which is live, doesn't have anything. The second view shows all the model in transparent except the one wall, which was part of it, and again we can see that that duplicate wall has now disappeared. So this is another one that we can go and mark that off as resolved. What we do from there is really it's down to individual preference, but what some people do is they'll create a new presentation called something like resolved issues or superseded or whatever it happens to be. We'll stick an X in there. And this always captures what's in the 3D view, so I'm just going to remove this one. And what I can then do is grab both of these issues here, select that one and the final one, and what we can do is drag and drop into the resolved issues. So we now have 22 in here where we had 24 to begin with, and then the 2 resolved ones are in here. And as we go through, that number hopefully should balance out so there's more resolved issues than actual live current ones. So I'll just reset the view, have a quick tidy up, put that back to default, and that concludes a quick overview of Solibri Office. Thanks for your time.